Hello, everybody. It's me, and it's another review. So, happy Saturday morning to anyone who is catching this live. Where I'm at, it actually looks like it's going to be a nice day out there. Sun is shining, and I'm not enjoying it yet. I'm in here doing this, so that says a little bit about me and my priorities. Anyway, how are you? Hopefully, you're enjoying the morning or evening or whatever it is when you watch this, or while you're watching this. So this was one that I've been meaning to do, but I knew it was going to be a little bit longer. So um, I guess I had to wait until this weekend to do it. Um, the reason that I think this one's going to be a little bit longer is because I'm going to be covering two videos. One of them is unlisted, but this is sort of like I think a pretty good way of dealing with the Darth Dawkins kind of 1-2 punch. So the first one's a Tom Rabbittt video where he had a conversation with HogTie Champ. He's talked with HogTie Champ before. They're aware of each other. They've talked in the past. And it kind of follows the usual Darth Dawkins line. It's most of the presuppositional stuff, um, essentially putting somebody in a position where I think he wants them to basically admit that the possibility of a God isn't really so much as a possibility, it's an inevitability, and they should just accept that, because if they don't, then the alternative is chaos or nonsense or whatever. Um, so it's sort of that same kind of argument that we usually get from him. But the second one is where things get a little bit interesting. The second one, just to give a preview of what's going on there, he has a conversation with somebody who claims to have been converted by his argument and some of J. Robbins' arguments, and further, a former atheist who is now, at the very least, convinced of the presuppositional apologetic, and I think is kind of converting to Christianity. This same individual, his name in the Clubhouse video is Mac Gruber. He was actually he showed up under the name Kent on a Pine Creek video last week, or the end of the week before. So the video that I'm going to be going over him, it's still unlisted. It's courtesy of Clubhouse Debates, or Capturing Debates, one of those two channels that's run by that British guy. And so, kudos to him. He had that on there. He had that recorded and unlisted it for me. Actually, my brother did as well. So props to and thanks to my brother Jay. Had also recorded that one. I was in it. I was actually in the audience for the first 15 minutes or so. It was one of Jay Robbins' things. I happened to get in there right before Darth Dawkins did, so I could actually see it and access it. And then after that, because Darth Dawkins was in it, the replay doesn't work for me because Clubhouse has some issues with how you block people. Anyway, or maybe that's not an issue. Maybe that's not a glitch. It's a feature. But either way. Um, so anyway, that's what's lined up now. Basically, this is a look at Darth Dawkins, kind of the what of God, and then the why you should worship him is sort of what he ends up getting into with Mac. Mac Gruber or Kent or whatever you want to call him. I'm just going to call him Mac from here on out. They get into that conversation. And that one's an interesting one because Mac, I'm not giving you any spoilers or anything, Mac essentially agrees with Darth. And is talking about how much he agrees with it and how persuasive it's been for him. Darth, his reaction is unsurprisingly skeptical. And the conversation gets a little weird. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it as far as setting things up. Thanks to everybody here that's here live. One thing that I should mention, a couple of things, comments have been popping up that have been kind of consistent. That's been the amount of ads on some of my videos. I have to apologize to anybody who's been previous viewers or long-suffering viewers because before I got monetized, most of my exposure to dealing with YouTube stuff is to create content through StreamYard, and that can leave you kind of naive. It definitely did with me. When I got into the position of monetizing things, and I did that, I kind of naively thought that the settings that YouTube would apply for monetization would be on the conservative side. They weren't. And it looks like they've been throwing out things like uninterruptible ads and things like that. So I'm in the process right now of I'm trying to adjust them as I make them now so that the ads are less intrusive. There's still going to be ads at the beginning of the videos and at the end of the videos. As time goes on, there might be a couple videos interspersed in some of the longer video runs, but I like to keep those interrupting ads kind of out of there. the other side ads and stuff will be up, but those uninterruptible ads, I'm going to do my best to get those clipped off. So I've made those adjustments to a couple of, well, about 30 of my older videos, and I'm going back and doing that. It was and thanks to I think Catmandu and there's a few other users who pointed this out as an issue. I had looked into it a little bit when you had responded to me, and I couldn't really find anything that was making the settings work. And then I decided, I'm going to instead of setting up a video through StreamYard, which keeps things very hands off, I'll just try, manually making one in YouTube. And sure enough, there's all the monetization settings. They get very granular if you're trying to go live directly through YouTube, which I'll admit I'd never actually done before. StreamYard had always handled it for me. I would just pull that up and rip and run. So anyway, thanks for pointing that out. I was able to find that, so hopefully that'll be a better viewing experience. I think it was actually reducing the number of views. So, for whatever it's worth, YouTube has an interesting way of like, hey, your stuff is viewable, let's monetize it. And now we've monetized it to a point where now your stuff is no longer viewable. So anyway, I hope that kind of clears things up. So anyway, thanks to anybody that did complain about that. I did take that into account. I did look into it, and I apologize for any inconvenience that was there in any of those videos and for how long it took me to figure it out, because I'm dense and technically not that savvy. It's not that I'm bad at this stuff. It's that I lack any patience for it. So as soon as it starts throwing me as soon as I start thinking it's going to take me more than 15 minutes to figure out, I start going Zoolander on my computer equipment. For those who've seen the movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. All right, okay, enough of that. So let's get into this video. So we're going to be starting with the first one. This is Darth Dawkins talking to HogTie Champ. I might speed this one up a little bit as it goes on, but we'll see how things go. So, normal rules apply. If volume has sounded weird, give a shout. I haven't seen anybody complaining yet. If the videos aren't working or something weird is going on, give a holler in the live chat, and I will take steps. Here we go.
If somebody says of me that I'm an unbeliever, I'll say, yeah, you're right. If somebody says you're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, I'll say, well, no, I'm not. You're mistaken about that. But I see why you believe that, and that's fine. We all have different opinions. But when somebody says, well, HogTie's a thief, that's wrong. It's not merely factually incorrect. It is bearing false witness. And under a biblical standard or any other sort of harms and benefits standard, that's a behavior we have to avoid. And then
hold on a second. So you're saying that if a Christian says to you, you are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, i.e. Romans 1, that they're bearing false witness against you?
No, I don't think. Hold on a second. Wait a second. Hold on. No, sorry. I got to think about that for 1 second. I do think that's false witness, but I think people come by it honestly.
Okay, so do you hold to the view that your mind and being is derivative from God?
No, I don't think that's the case.
Okay, so you do not classify or categorize your mind as creaturely, deriving and depending upon the mind of God. So in that scenario, God's mind would be autonomous. So then your mind being not derivative and subject to the autonomous mind of God, then your mind would be autonomous from your point of view. Your mind, it by definition.
When your mind be subject to either the forces of nature or forces of physicalism or whatever other, Darth is really big about throwing this kind of thing out to atheists. Like, well, you have to have your own ultimate worldview or something like that. But when it comes to this particular question, when he brings this up, it's either you have a mind that is somehow tied to the revelatory epistemology granting mind of God, or it's totally autonomous. Why is it one or the other if you haven't figured out what that atheist's worldview is? They might not believe in a God, but they might also believe that their mind is not autonomous for whatever that means, to whatever extent that means.
So it's definitionally true.
No, that wasn't the part I was objecting to. I'm sorry. I wanted to let you go. I didn't want to interrupt you there.
So do you understand that you?
I don't think that's the case.
Okay, well, there's only two positions that you can take about your mind, okay? Either your mind will be...
Yeah, that's a good question. Lorraine Drosophila, where does Darth get mind equals creaturely? part of this is from some relatively basic theology, whether it's kind of grounded in sort of like what you'd considered like I don't know if standard's the best word for it, like Catholic versus Protestant, but for whatever reason, a lot of these guys, the ones that are in kind of the evangelical Protestant, maybe Calvinist, Darth doesn't he doesn't say he's a Calvinist, but there's this creator creature distinction that they like to prattle on about quite a bit. And it's significant throughout a lot of Christian theology, but the idea in this case of a mind that there's like they appeal to a God being a mind, but obviously a mind in the case of God's mind wouldn't be creaturely. It's completely autonomous. Our minds are creaturely minds, and therefore um, they need a God mind for broadcast or something. I don't know. It's weird, and it's actually one of the few things. I don't think I've ever really challenged anybody on it. I don't know that J. Rabbit has ever really talked about it at length either. But it's one of those ones where they kind of presented in this kind of like tone of voice, like, well, duh, like everybody knows this. Like, well, maybe somebody with a particularly radicalized Sunday school knows that, but I don't know that the majority of people are really acquainted with that particular take. And every time these guys bring it up, lots of people start throwing up question marks and like raised eyebrows, like, what in the hell are you talking about? You mind diving into that a little deep, maybe flushing that out, because sounds like that's raising a lot more questions than it's answering. And they don't. Basically, I think the lesson that you're supposed to take from that is like, God's big and you're little. He's strong and you're weak. He's smart and you're dumb. That kind of thing. And I apologize if that's too dismissive, but when it comes to Darth's view on God, I don't know if I really give it much more credit than that. In fact, I kind of agree with Jim here. Darth's religion is so antiseptic and sterile that I'm amazed anyone finds it appealing. I think the second video actually gets into the appeal, at least for people like Darth, and it's troubling.
In your conception will be autonomous. Okay, it operates for whatever reason by itself, not being derivative and dependent upon the autonomous mind of God, or you will reject that notion of your mental autonomy, and your mind will be derivative and dependent under the authority of the autonomous mind of God. It's a true dichotomy.
No, it either is or it isn't, but given his worldview, not necessarily. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, it either is the case we have autonomous minds, or it is not the case that we have autonomous minds, right? The fact that now he's trying to like, no, it is the case. Like, you either believe that your mind is dependent upon God, or you believe your mind is completely independent. That is not a dichotomy, because your mind could be dependent on something other than God. So he needs to go back to the drawing board on that one, I think. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but that's my take on that. I think he's trying to turn that into he's trying to say it's a dichotomy so he can put HogTie in kind of a black and white situation. This kind of binary choice. There's only two options now, buddy. Like Darth, that's Darth's favorite rhetorical tick.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so do you recognize then that when you reject God as creator, you are implicitly claiming that your mind and being is autonomous?
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean,
okay.
wait,
So if I can show that first that you concede that your mind is autonomous, but that the reasons that you give for not believing in God, you violate them instantly, this will be proof that you're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. Let me state that again.
please, yeah.
Okay, if I can show that your position is that your mind is autonomous, and that your rejection of God is not by your claim is not by virtue of your mental autonomy, but that you have some reason that you have that is legitimate not to believe in God, but you instantly violate that when you operate from your worldview, that means that your reasons for rejecting God would be arbitrary then.
Okay.
So therefore, this would be, if I can show that, that'll be definitive proof you're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
If you could show that.
What is your fundamental reason for not believing in the God world?
I like that. He says if he could show that, that would be definitive proof, and then goes on to ask the other question: what's your definitive proof of a not God world? So okay, so I guess if I could show it, that's definitive proof. Now, since I've said that, that is definitive proof. Now, you prove your worldview to me. Like, no.
Okay, first I want to give you that you said you're going to demonstrate two things. The first one's easy. I do think my mind's autonomous. That is, it doesn't depend on another mind. So I don't know if you have some legwork to do to get that off the ground, but I'd suggest that we get it. That is the case.
Well, we both agree that you conceptualize and categorize your mind as autonomous.
Clive Gordon, are creatures the same as animals? A creature is anything created. So that's what the word creature means, right? A creature is something that was created by a creator. It implies a creator. Thus the creator-creature distinction. The creator is obviously, the weird thing about this is though that there's aspects to this kind of this notion in philosophy of the creator being superior to the creation. And there are things that kind of, I mean, I don't know if Darth's ever read Frankenstein, just as an example, but you might want to take a look at that. I mean, that's an early take on some of the tensions between that philosophy and those kinds of concepts.
Yeah, it's not, well, I mean, it's part of the world, but it's not. Do you mean like not dependent on another mind? I think, yeah.
Your mind, the autonomous mind, from the human perspective, just simply means that your mind is and operates without the necessity of deriving and depending upon the autonomous mind of God.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense because you wouldn't know that God's mind is autonomous or not. It's only autonomous by definition, right? And then appealing to that from a dependent mind means you're automatically at a disadvantage. So saying that God's mind is autonomous while yours is dependent, if the only way that you can define that is, or defend that, is by defining your mind in relationship to that and saying, because we don't know everything, there must be a mind out there that does know everything, and our minds must naturally be dependent upon that mind. All of that, none of that follows. You have to demonstrate the connectivity between that, right? And the only way that you can do that is to say that thing that knows everything is also the thing that made everything, and therefore from that connection, we can know some things because it allows us to. From there, you might get a better connection. That might be what Darth is trying to get at, but Darth is talking around a lot of things that he just kind of presupposes and assumes is correct from a lot of different theological stances. House of Commons, atheists get very uncomfortable when they have to defend their worldview. That is DD's strength. It's not really his. His strength is buried in this kind of rhetorical device, the presuppositional or his isn't entirely presuppositional either. It's also a kind of butchered combination of contingency argument combined with a modal ontological argument, slathered up with some presuppositionalism and some transcendental argumentation thrown in for good measure. The notion that an atheist has to defend their worldview is not a thing. Christians don't have to defend their worldview. That's not what I think ends up happening here. Darth makes it seem as though he's on the well, he is on the attack. He believes that. He's going to go after this person because they have this worldview that he believes is wrong, and they're wrong on the internet, and so he's going to stomp them out. He's going to show them why they're so wrong. They could be wrong, but the issue here is that your worldview is your worldview, right? And depending on what you mean by worldview, and depending what you mean by defense of it, there's a lot of different things that can happen here. So one would be if a worldview is just my collection of different conclusions and ideas about the world around me and about what I think reality is. If you're a doxastic and voluntarist, a lot of those conclusions weren't made because you chose them. They were made because they were sort of inevitable conclusions. You're convinced of them, and that's a process that you don't entirely control. Darth talks about people choosing to believe. You will choose to believe this. You will choose to believe that. He talks as if he believes in doxastic voluntarism, and he might be a doxastic voluntarist. It would be kind of consistent, I think, if you take into account some of the things that he seems to hold to in terms of salvation. Right? You choose to believe in Jesus, and then you believe it, and then you're saved. When I've been in conversations with people who are like, well, you just have to choose Jesus. You have to believe in him. I'm like, I can't do that. When I've called out that that's one of my biggest issues with the scriptures, with the New Testament, is that if that's the notion of salvation that Christians are trafficking in, is that you simply have to choose to believe it, and then by virtue of that, by choosing to believe that salvation was offered and by accepting it that way, that's how you accept salvation, believing in it. You can't make that choice, right? There's a more nuanced take on this, and that is your heart is regenerated, and so then you're kind of pulled along to, you are convinced by the message, and then you convert. And that's a subtly different message. That's a different take on grace. Not too different, but different enough where that one actually kind of corresponds with what we understand about doxastic involuntarism, which, as far as I've seen in most of the research, is closer to how our brain works. So if they wanted to say that there's a supernatural intervening force like grace working through us at first, and then we convert, sure. But when you hear Darth talk about it, you hear Darth talk about like you picking that belief, and then by picking that somehow you get it right, and then by picking the right belief, you get to heaven. That sounds dangerously close to just being saved by works, which is something that I know Darth doesn't agree with because he rails against that notion when he has to talk to Catholics because he thinks that's what Catholics believe in, even though that's not what Catholics believe in. So, yeah, the idea that I don't think that this is actually a strength. It definitely sounds loud when Darth does it, but the notion that he's coming at this with this percent like you atheists need to defend your worldview. That's on Darth. That's Darth's underwear tied up in knots, pinching him and causing him discomfort. The fact that his tone of voice and his presentation makes other people uncomfortable and they ride along with it. And I've been one of them. I've gotten suckered into his diva routine myself a couple of times. The fact that that happens early on in a conversation, especially if they're not initiated with what he's doing, I don't think that should be confused with people like, oh, they're uncomfortable when they have to defend their worldview. There's two things that happen. One, they've never had to defend "quote unquote" a worldview, and two, they don't understand a lot of the concepts he's throwing out there, and he's yelling at them or borderline yelling at them as if they do. And when they ask two questions, clarifying questions, too many times, he then accuses them of being deceitful and lying to him and or dodging or running away. That's not a strength. That's Darth's weakness. So.
Yeah, no, I'm down with that. Sure.
Now, what is your reason? What is your reason that is not arbitrary for not believing in the God world?
Okay, solid question. Just to be clear, when you said that you could then demonstrate that that means I'm suppressing truth and unrighteousness, I didn't see how that followed, but I'm not saying you're wrong. I totally want to give you the room to ramp up to do that. So let me answer that question. And it was what basically boils down to why don't I believe in God? Is that the central question?
Yeah. What is your reason for believing in the not God world and not believing in the God world?
Oh, this will be good. Because he's not going to accept the. Watch this. What he's going to end up doing is what he does quite a bit. He's going to ask HogTie for his reasons, and then as HogTie lays out his reasons, Darth is going to treat his reasons as if they're a deductive argument, and then accuse him of fallacies. Jim Wright, let's assume Darth's takes are unassailable. Why should I want to start thinking like him? Is it better than anything else? Good questions to ask. House of Comments, as a Christian, I must also confess that I'm not a big fan of DD's strategy to defend our faith, and I must apologize for his manners. No, you don't have to apologize for his manners. I don't think that Christians are a monolith, and I mean, apology appreciated, but you really don't have to apologize for him. Because otherwise you'd be apologizing for the actions of lots of different Christians all over the place. So, I mean, it's one of those weird things like, when I think it's an old trick, but, if I bring up an example of where religion can go wrong and I cite something like the Spanish Inquisition, the one thing I don't want the Christian that I'm talking to is then apologize for the Inquisition. I don't blame them for the Spanish Inquisition. I blame the Spanish Inquisition for the Spanish Inquisition or actions, some of the worst actions of that Inquisition. And that's even that whole thing is more nuanced than people give it credit for. Yeah, and if somebody's trying to blame individuals for the acts of another group of Christians from hundreds of years ago, I don't think that that's helpful. I think that it can inform people's disbelief, and it can inform believers into the dangers of certain kinds of dogma or certain kind of rhetoric within their faith traditions. That's worth examining. But whether or not it's blamed for it or anything like that, I don't think is. That's not something you can put on an individual.
Okay, it's going to sound long, but it's not. Trust me, it's like 10 seconds. It's based on an examination of the evidence. I think that the things that are put forward as evidence for God have other explanations, and just on balance of the evidence I've seen as I've walked this crazy world of ours, I've just come to the conclusion I don't think this vision of God matches reality.
Okay, so you need evidentiary support in order to adopt the God worldview. Is that correct?
The answer is yes. There's evidence. There's one sort of caveat to it, but I don't think it's helpful right now. I don't want
Okay.
to. I don't want to.
Okay. What is the evidentiary support for the not God worldview?
The evidentiary support for the not God worldview. Just I'm not going to take all day. Just let me gather my thoughts for a second here. The evidentiary support is that there's a diversity of claims about potential supernatural explanations for the world, and each of those claims are based on evidence that just have a more straightforward and consistent explanation. Again, I can put. I'm just giving you the bones.
Okay. Okay. Do you understand that the God world and the not God world are universal declarations? Do you understand that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So when you hold to the not God world, you're holding to a universal declaration. Okay. A universal.
Yeah.
What is your evidence that the not God world is true?
Okay, let me address that in like 8 seconds. I'm going to mute because I'm going to yell at my kids for just 1 second. You notice, like, hang on. Sorry, when I yell at the kids, and it turns out my wife is here, and I just yelled at her. So they go to bed. Anyway, so my evidence. So what it is. Well, first off, I want to be clear. I don't think there is any sound deductive argument that would necessarily lead to the conclusion that there just simply can't be any gods, nowhere, no how.
Do you have evidence for the not God world?
Yeah, and the evidence is that you have to look at the evidence, for God. So I mean, there are basically 3 categories. And in this case, I do want you to interrupt me if you hear a point you want to address.
I just want you to tell me, what is the evidence that all facts, individually and collectively, universally, do not derive and depend upon God? What's the evidence for that?
The evidence is
Well, the evidence for that would probably be the existence of evil. But I kind of feel like if I bring that one up, I'm kind of holding Christians, like I'm holding Christians to an unreasonable. It is kind of an unreasonable standard because I don't think a lot of Christians would hold to it, but Darth might, and Darth's take on it might. I don't think that a lot of Christians like Darth trafficking in the apologetics that he's trafficking in can reliably account for evil, given the entailments of some of the things that they're saying. And I've laid that out in previous things before. If every absolutely necessary fact is contingent upon God, that means all the bad stuff too. And if you want to try to argue that God's not, that there is no responsibility from that God because God is good, then you end up getting in a problematic situation in which that God could literally do anything. Morally speaking, I don't mean like logically speaking, but literally speaking, like it could, kill people for quote unquote for fun. That would not be a bad thing. It would not be a bad thing for God to kill for sport. Because he's God, he's definitionally good. I'm going to end up chasing this down about a dozen different tangents if I get into it. But when he asks about that, what is your evidence for, the possibility that not all facts derive and depend upon the mind of God? Well, evil, because part of the definition of this God is that it's as an ultimate, it is somehow on top of being, sort of ontologically ultimate. It is also I think it's soteriologically ultimate in a sense. It has a kind of value, right? It's the greatest of whatever. It's salvifically significant in almost any faith tradition. It either provides eternal life or it provides escape from a karmic wheel. It weighs the good and the bad and judges them perfectly without error, at the end of time, whatever. There's some kind of salvific perfection in this being, or a transformative, a promise of transformation and perfection in the afterlife. And I think if you've got that kind of being that's on hold, if you want to traffic in that kind of an ultimate being, if that's part of that, but this being is also the source for every fact, every single thing, then some of those bad things also have to originate from that being too, and those might conflict with that being with that particular thing possessing these other qualities of being salvific or morally perfect, right? It's a morally perfect thing that's also the origin point of everything morally depraved within its own standard, right? Otherwise, where else could it come from? The standard appeal to this in their case would be, well, no, that's just an absence of, right? Evil is just the absence of God's nature, an absence of that, right? But an absence of morality isn't necessarily immorality, or an absence of good isn't necessarily malice, right? That's the opposite, not the absence of it, right? There's a difference between helping someone, hurting someone, or just ignoring someone, right? There's a range of different things, and oftentimes I think Christians do this kind of thing, like, oh, well, evil is just the absence of good. Well, first of all, that conflicts with another potential property of this being, is that it can't be absent, right? Because it's omnipresent and it's all powerful. It's never not anywhere, right? So then that starts to talk about a concept of an evil where mankind has the capacity to either block God, prevent him from getting through, which sort of also defies notions of what I was mentioning before, grace. Whether or not you think God's grace is irresistible, or whether or not it's conventional, and this gets into these other theological concepts of, you could be the most hard-hearted person, but the Holy Spirit is going to turn you into a Bible-believing Christian. Or is it, no, even if you're super hard-hearted, God could kind of work, His grace and Holy Spirit could work on your heart, but you still have to assent to that. So that's some of my evidence for it. I just don't think the concepts work, but we'll see what HogTie says.
The world exists. And as far as I can tell, it's not super well organized, and there's pain and suffering and everything else. But there are a lot of people who have explanations for that. And, traditionally it was a council of gods, in this culture or that culture. And then sort of more germane to what we're talking about, there is the monotheist approach, saying that there's one creator God who doesn't just have like a bailiwick, but is in charge of the whole place. But there are many such claims. And there are kind of, when pressed for evidence, most believers can come up with three categories of evidence. One of them, the natural world exists. How the heck did that happen? Great question. The second one being personal experience. That I've just met so many people who will say, like Veckel, for example, will tell a story.
You asked me to interrupt you earlier?
Yeah, okay, go ahead, yeah.
Okay. I'm not hearing evidence for the not God world.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm getting to that. I'm not going to go into each of these three things individually. I just want to describe to you the categories. I
just would like to hear, what is the evidence that indicates the not God world?
Okay, gotcha. So I'm just going to use one illustration on the personal experience thing. Beckel was folding laundry, and then he just had an experience. And it's an experience I don't understand. The Holy Spirit came to him, and he has been a Bible-believing Christian every millisecond since then. I've heard his story. It's compelling. Okay.
I'm not interested. Let me interrupt you because you said I could. I'm not interested why other people's reasons for God have failed. Okay. Kai Nielsen, the famous atheist philosopher, said all of the reasons for God may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists. What I want to know from you,
which HogTie is going to probably agree with, he just did. Darth keeps using this quote. He's used it in the last, I think, 4 or 5 videos that I've seen him. He keeps using it, and every time I want somebody to turn him around and say yes. And it may also be the case that every argument for the not God world that will fail does not mean that the not God world isn't true. The same structure of Kai Nielsen's statement there applies on both sides of things, and the way that Darth is using that is sort of not exactly the. I mean, Kai Nielsen was making that point, right? The idea that you can craft an argument that might be valid and seems to indicate that a God doesn't exist or something like that, or you craft these arguments, any argument to posit the idea of a God, and somebody can go at him and just pick them apart and be like, nope. That doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't some state of affairs where there actually is a supernatural being that's responsible for the creation of everything, right? And that's fair, right? Because in philosophy, you're using philosophy to raise questions and to challenge these arguments and to well, not just to criticize, but really it is just to raise questions. I think for Darth, the fact that Darth is using this Kai Nielsen statement almost as if it's supposed to be like atheist dogma, like it's from the Gospel of Kai Nielsen, and there it is, atheist. Kneel and respect one of your apostles. He said this, therefore you're wrong. Like that, I get the impression that Darth seems to think that if he throws that out there, that'll get the atheist to heed. It's like, no, that's not exactly his point, right? You can flip that right back around and be like, yes, I understand that those arguments for God may fail, but God could still exist. The arguments for a not God world could all fail, and that doesn't make it the case that the not God world is in fact not the accurate one. And yet here Darth is saying that quote from Kai Nielsen and then demanding an argument for a not God world.
is I want to hear, I don't want to hear about how people's reasonings for God have failed. What I want to hear is, what is your evidence that there is no God, that you're in a not God world?
I understand the question. When I said go ahead and interrupt me, it's because there were three things I wanted to mention, and I certainly wanted you to feel comfortable.
I want to hear the evidence for the not God world. Can you give it to me right now, please?
Yes, I can. So the first category was the world exists. How do you explain that? The second category was personal experience, which I do think benefits explanation. The third category is specifically for Christianity. The Bible is really clear. The Bible doesn't say, well, there's probably some kind of creator God. The Bible has a specific rendition of God's goals in creation and God's plan for salvation and how that plan has been executed.
Yeah, HogTie, this is all extraneous. You're not giving me evidence. You're not giving me, even if you were to demonstrate to some people's satisfaction that the Bible is as historically as real as a comic book. Okay, that's besides the point. What is the evidence that there is no God?
Okay, so let me do this then. Okay, so there is evidence that needs to be explained, and I'm saying that on examination of that evidence, when I see that none of those three categories I mentioned, except for the Bible itself, are dispositive or discriminative, right? To say that, well, the world exists, therefore the Christian God is real, is absolutely a non sequitur. Because we're
not talking about right now. Okay, you see, you need to focus. You need to answer the question. All I'm hearing is a lot of Charlie Brown's teacher. What is the evidence that the not God world is true?
Okay, well, if you aren't listening to what I'm saying, then I don't.
No, I'm listening very carefully.
Okay,
but I'm not hearing a clear and concise, direct answer to my question.
Okay, because as I said at the opening, there is a diversity of claims about possible supernatural explanations, and each of those supernatural claims is well connected to a naturalistic explanation. And I can give you an example if you want. I don't want to do it now because
it doesn't follow that other people's reasonings are wrong. What I want you to do is, are you able, in your rejection of the God world, are you able to establish that it is the case that there's any universal?
Oh, sorry, you explain that point. What do you mean that there's any universal?
A universal. Well, your not God world is a universal. I'm still waiting. I'm hearing a lot of verbiage, but I'm not hearing I'm not hearing a clear answer. What is the evidence? You said you require evidence to believe in the God world. I want to see if you follow that criterion. I'm not getting a clear answer. What is the evidence that the not God world is true?
Okay, so now I'm just for the moment, okay, I don't need you to interrupt, okay? I am giving you, right, my justification, which I said right at the front. I don't know if there's
I want evidence. What is the evidence for the not God world?
Just hold on. An argument is a type of evidence. There's physical evidence.
Okay, good. What is the evidence that God does not exist? Is it because God does not exist because people's reasonings for God have failed? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Is that a good way of putting it? It's not a totally unfair way to put it.
Sir, is that your evidence that God does not exist because those who invoke God, their reasonings for God have failed?
No, that's not a complete rendition, but I think you're on the right track. So what I'm saying is,
sir, I need a clear answer here. Okay.
Well, then
God does not exist because people's reasonings for God have failed. So that's not your reasoning. Okay.
Well, no.
Now, see what Darth is trying to do. Darth's trying to take his reasons and then try to throw it into some kind of deductive argument. There's nothing wrong with reaching the conclusion inductively that if you're exposed, this is something that he would bring up. Darth would ask Dr. Bowen his reasons for not being a believer, why he deconverted or deconstructed or whatever. And for him, it was because of his exposure to comparative religions, right? I mean, he studies ancient Near Eastern religions. He got into the history of that. He started realizing some of the stuff, some of these things that he took for granted as being only found in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, whatever, were actually concepts that were in these other religions from the same region, same culture, predated it. And you can see the same kinds of like good points and bad points, and that was enough, right? That led him away to it. He's like, you can see this over and over again. And the more often you're exposed to this when you're looking at different religions, these stories kind of succeed or fail, but it leads you to the conclusion that these faith traditions are nothing more than just faith traditions, but they might not reflect an actual state of affairs that a supernatural being or beings exists. And this isn't controversial for somebody like Darth. There are plenty of people who are devout Hindus that Darth would disagree with, even though those devout Hindus believe in the existence of multiple gods. So I always think it's a little weird when he tries to go into this kind of thing, because this is how bad I think his thing has gotten, right? One of the key aspects of being able to understand or relate to this notion that our minds are dependent, which is where this started, is understanding that the nature of God's mind is one of reason and logic and all this other kind of stuff, right? But for whatever reason, it seems like deductive logic is holy and inductive logic is sinful or somehow wanting because it's probabilistic. There's something odd about this because this is when I start thinking that Darth Dawkins might think that deductive logic is some kind of spell. Because you can prove, because you have valid, there's inference rules, and those are truth preserving. If you stick anything in there, then you get this thing that if it's true, then it's definitely true kind of thing. And then he just goes ahead and runs with it. Well, that argument is valid and sound, as he often will say. As if constructing it correctly will make it true. But that's not, and that's reflective of the mind of God, right? Like, well, then it kind of sounds like all God had to do was tie into this mystical thing called logic that existed somewhere, and then just word things in a particular way, and make sure that they follow the divine metaphysics of logic that are responsible for creating the universe, and then boom, everything's so. It sounds like God presupposes logic in order to get this logical stuff to occur. Just a thing to think about. But yeah, when he's doing this with HogTie, this is a way to implicitly just reject the notion of implicit logic, or not implicit logic, of inductive reasoning. And the only thing that I think that they do that for is because a lot of these precepts, a lot of apologists seem to think that inductive reasoning's not as good as deductive, because with deductive you get certain truth, and that's not the case. That's not really the case. Anyway. Oh, and House of Comments. I blocked him because he used keck in a comment. Call me petty, but I could tolerate a lot of different viewpoints. But if somebody comes in here trafficking with 10-year-old Reddit shitposting meme lord, ironic fascist nonsense, even if even if it's winking, especially if it's winking. Ironic Reddit shitlord meme posting crap from Reddit fascists, that person will get banned. I have zero patience for that shit. None. If you come in here doing keck or any of that kind of fucking crap, trafficking any of that weird, right wing Reddit basement bullshit, you will be gone. So there's enough right wing horse shit in this country as it is. Ironic Nazis are even worse, right? There's nothing worse than somebody who wants to stomp people into the ground for a dopamine hit while wearing a brony t-shirt. Fucked up.
What
no,
then?
no,
Okay.
Not my belief at all. That particular
Okay,
phrasing
good.
is
Then
not.
Then I no longer want to hear about other people's reasonings for God, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I don't want to hear about other people's thinking. I want to know from you why the not
What else do
God
you want to
world
talk
is
about?
true.
Yeah.
I want you to, yeah, you see, you're doing what you've always done
Here we
going
go.
back to your Google Plus days. You're doing your best interpretation of Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. You're not giving me a clear answer. What is your rational justification for the not God world?
Because there is a sensible, naturalistic explanation that explains both the physical world.
It doesn't follow that you have an explanation that it's true.
As renderings of God.
No, sir, because you have an explanation, it doesn't follow from it that it's true. I have an explanation for the God. Okay, I have an explanation for the God world, but you don't accept that explanation. Giving an explanation about.
Yeah, keck is offensive to me, mostly because of its associations with the shittier aspects of alt-right crap from online stuff. Some people just think keck is just like an alternate form of lol or haha or something like that. It isn't. Look up its origins, what it got weaponized into. If I see that or Peppy the Frog or any of that tired ass Reddit horse shit, I'm banning you. We don't even have to get into an ideological conversation about it. That's just some tired ass shit. It doesn't belong here. I don't want that stuff in my live chat. That shit was old 2 minutes after it started coming out. And anybody that traffics in it will get banned. So learn your alt-right terms, learn to identify your Kekistani types, your Pepe bros, your alt-right shit-posting meme lord stuff. Don't traffic in that crap.
How the natural world could be is not a rational justification that it is.
So when you say in Taylor it doesn't follow, do you mean deductively? Is that what you mean? I'm gonna have to agree with you.
That okay, good. So you can't inductively show that God doesn't exist.
Oh no,
right?
Yeah, I can. That is, yeah. No, that is the.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when House of Comments was using Keck in the comment here, he wasn't referring to World of Warcraft. I know that that's what it refers back to, but it's most common history when it comes up in stuff like this, especially for like alt-right Christian types, is that shit.
Type of reasoning. You're getting closer there, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have any inductive or deductive case that God doesn't exist, do you?
No, inductive, yes. I don't have a deductive case. I mean, I heard deductive arguments
but
are valid.
induction doesn't lead you to logically necessary.
Has it? How? How has Pepe been reclaimed by the online left? I mean, something must have really changed. I mean, you were still seeing those things at like alt-right rallies and shit. So, all right.
Conclusions.
Right? Yeah. No.
Okay. So the point is, inductively, you could never show that God doesn't exist.
Hold on. Inductively, I could never. Sorry, did you say deductively or inductively?
Inductively.
Well, when you say, yes, you can. You can show things to be the case.
Okay, good. Show me inductively. Yeah, show me right now inductively how there is no God.
Okay. So yeah, we're talking about like follow inductively, that provides a justification, but we both acknowledge that doesn't logically entail it's not necessary.
Okay. So can you show me inductively how God doesn't exist?
Okay. Yes, there are some gods that you and I both agree deductively.
Sir, can you show me inductively how there is no supreme being and creator? Inductively? Yes.
Yeah. So there's a whole host of propositions for what gods might be. Any of them I see.
Okay, stop. You know what? You should be a used car salesman.
Okay. So we're going to go to person.
Listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully. No, because the whole time I've been asking you here, you've been giving me this rambling discourse, which is all over the page.
I'm literally telling you my
Please don't overtalk me. Please don't overtalk me. Okay? Now, we're talking about God as defined minimalistically, where God is the creator, the supreme being who is the creator, who may or may not have additional properties. Now, what we're talking about is the creator-creature distinction. Your position is that the creator-creature distinction is false. So far in the last 20 minutes, you have not given me a clear, rational defense that is understandable and intelligible as to why God as creator does not exist. Okay, I'm still waiting for that.
Okay, so now so you said minimal. You had a minimal rendering of God.
God does not exist because.
Oh, I don't know the cause of God not existing. Is that what you're asking for? Like what cause?
I want your evidentiary support, your rational justification as to why there is no God.
Okay. Well, I can do that.
The issue, well, first of all, that's a category error to say the cause of why God doesn't exist. Okay.
I just try to interpret your question. That's all.
Yeah. So, now, I'm still waiting. We're 20 minutes into this. I would like a rational justification why there is no creator God. Can you please give me it?
Can I? I might be able to. Then we're talking about an inductive.
Well, I've been asking the same question for 20 minutes.
For 20 minutes. It's been about 8 minutes, but okay. If you want to say that. Yeah, I can give you my actual, honestly possessed justification, which of course you won't agree with, and that's fine. Do you?
I'm waiting. You're bloviating.
Look, I'm not.
I'm actually surprised HogTie didn't blow his top right there. Like, he's a better person than I am. I mean, this is some childish bullshit. I mean, and this is how far you're going to get with somebody like Darth, right? He asks for reasons, you give your reasons, then he starts implicitly turning that into you haven't provided him with an argument that's valid enough to throw him off, right? To satisfy him, which isn't what he asked you for. He just wanted to know what your reasons were. Then he switches the tactic on you without warning. And now he's still asking the same thing, and then instead of actually letting HogTie finish his explanation, now he's pretending, oh, I'm just bored, right? At this point, it becomes pretty clear for Darth the only thing that he wants what he wants is somebody to throw slogans at him, right? He wants a quick, pithy, meme-length kind of retort, right, that will trigger him. He just wants to have the kind of conversation that he sees in a news bit between ads on Fox News or something. Although I have a feeling that Fox News is probably a little too left-wing for Darth.
I'm not even talking. You're
the same old HogTie that you are in Google Plus. You're doing the same old rhetorical gymnastics here. What is the rational justification that there is no God?
This is what he does. Do you want to hear it or not? Put yourself on mute.
I've been
you have all the time in the world to respond to it.
Hey, listen. My patience with your disingenuousness is running out.
So
I want you to tell me why there is no God.
There's a false accusation.
If I hear you over talk me again, I'm kicking you from the room.
Darth has been over-talking him for the entire time, right? It's like he's repeatedly over-talked HogTie every time HogTie has started to get into an explanation. I mean, when you start making snoring noises when someone's in the middle of an explanation, does that count as over-talking? I guess it doesn't, since you're just making rude noises. I mean, how old is Darth, really?
Understood.
Okay. I have been waiting for quite a while now, and you haven't given me a direct answer. All I've been getting is bloviating. I want to know why there is no creator God.
Okay. So now it's my turn?
I'm waiting.
Okay, so you are actually waiting. And by the way, your false accusation that I'm lying is not acceptable, but here we are. So again, I gave you my justification, and you pointed out quite rightly that it is not like...
Okay, I want you to stop with the bullshit, okay?
Good Lord. Darth got so angry at HogTie Champ that he broke his mic. He broke his mic. Like, way to go, HogTie. You really got something out of him there.
You are an effing bullshitter, okay? I didn't ask you for an analysis of what before. I want you to tell me right now, what is the rational justification that there is no creator God? Go.
I have no deductive argument that there's no creative God anywhere. My inductive...
Which is fair. So I'm glad, HogTie's... I don't have a deductive argument. What did Darth ask again? I want a rational explanation. A rational explanation would be an appeal to inductive logic. When you start talking about those other stories that exist out there that, like, we've seen all these other religions try to make these same kinds of claims about a god or multiple gods doing this and answering prayers and responding to sacrifices and changing the weather and changing fortunes to good or to bad and all this other kind of stuff. And then it turns out it was something else. It was incidental, or it was, that there were perfectly natural explanations for it. Maybe that god is working within the confines of nature, but... there's lots of different reasons why you can believe that you don't think that that's actually true. Doesn't mean you have to present. This is the worst thing about this. That this is where House of Comments was going with this thing. Like, you need to be prepared to defend your worldview. Darth needs to be prepared to accept the reasons a person has for their worldview, and not pivot to, well, your reasons don't make for a good deductive argument, and until they do, I can dismiss you as a completely irrational person. That is fallacious thinking. That makes no fucking sense at all.
The argument is, of every God that I've been told about, the evidence that supports that God has a better, more coherent and sensible explanation.
That's local atheism, my friend. That's a bait and switch. Okay, that is local atheism. Okay, P.Z. Myers. P.Z. Myers, listen to me carefully. Do you know who P.Z. Myers is?
I do.
Okay, P.Z. Myers tried that out. Okay, you're going from global atheism to local atheism. Now, telling me that every God concept that has presented to you so far is unsatisfactory, okay? It doesn't follow from the fact that all of the rationales for these various God concepts are unsatisfactory to you. It doesn't follow from that there is no creator God. You told me...
Right, and so Darth is asking for an argument. He's saying reasons, but he's asking for an argument. What if you provided him an argument and he's like, no, that's not a good argument? Well, it might be the case that all arguments for a not God world fail. Doesn't mean that a not God world's not true. You just throw that right back at him. I can't believe how the level of self, like, he's right there with with that Kai Nielsen quote, right? He can apply that to his side of things, but because Kai Nielsen worded it that way, it only applies to people breaking down arguments for God. Like, no. Kai Nielsen said that just because none of those arguments might work doesn't mean that God's not real. Cool, dude. The reason the reason for that, why it's rational, is because it would work the other way as well. You can't turn around and say, well, you can't provide me with an argument for the not God world, therefore it can't be the case. He's making the assumption he's making the mistake that he's projecting onto HogTie. It's incredible. Like, he's literally begging for HogTie to give him an argument so he can tell him that the argument doesn't work, therefore there is the not God world is not possible. Like, please give me an argument so that I can commit the fallacy I'm accusing you of. It's really stunning. And there's absolutely no reason for this. Provide like all this animosity here, and they're only talking about the possibility of a God existing. We haven't even talked about whether or not it's worthy of worship.
You need a rational justification for a worldview. And in the absence of that rational justification, you dismiss it. Now, what is the rational justification for global atheism, not local atheism? Go ahead.
Okay, can you? I'll do that. Can you just tell me? I want to know local and global. What does that refer to? With
global atheism is there are no gods whatsoever. More specifically, there is no creator, supreme being, creator God. Local atheism is 1, 2, 3, 5. How many gods are presented to me locally? The reasons for those are unsatisfactory for me to believe in. That's called local atheism. Okay. We're not discussing local atheism. You are defending global atheism. Now, I want to hear out of your mouth the rational justification why there is no supreme being, creator God.
And if you wanted to defend global atheism, according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on atheism and agnosticism, global atheism can be the stance that there exist no entities worthy of worship. Done.
Okay, gotcha. I understand. And that is what I thought you meant by local. And we are talking about local because I'm saying that I gave you a justification for local atheism. And
I want to hear your rationale for global atheism. Would you please give it?
Okay. As I said, I do not think that global atheism is supported by a deductive argument. And I said that right from the beginning.
Do you have a rational justification at all for global atheism?
Yes, but inductive.
What is it? Is the conclusion logically necessary?
No, definitely not.
Okay. So what is the inductive rationale that there is no God?
Well, I'll say again, it's because when presented with a wide array of potential supernatural explanations for the things in the world.
You are diverting again to local atheism.
No, that's literally the straight up answer. That's literally
listen to me. The fact that locally presented gods. Okay, you know what?
Tell me why my answer.
I'm going to tell you again. My patience is really running out with you.
You don't have any patience.
You haven't changed one iota since the Google Plus day. Okay. You can. Okay, you're gone. You're
bye.
Same old dog. Hit the road. Okay. You see, this is what we're left with, folks. This guy is a pathological liar while pretending not to be. Okay? He has the gift of gab, but did anybody hear a clear, succinct, circumspect rationale that the...
I mean, it's not surprising, is it, HogTie, that, he doesn't understand what induction is, other than that it must be bad, because it's not deductive logic, so therefore it's just this low rent, cross-eyed cousin of deductive logic. Therefore, it needs to be cast out. Yeah, just awful. But props to you, HogTie, for getting him to kind of hit on all of his main weaknesses.
The not God world is true, other than him going, well, all of the God claims that people bring to me so far, they're unsatisfactory.
No, I didn't hear that, dog. And I didn't even know he was on even.
Now,
what you say?
Lest anybody thinks that I am being too tough on HogTie, this is the same bullshit that he shoveled out many years ago and thereafter on Google Plus days and on Discord. It's the same old crap with this guy. He will bloviate you until your eyes glaze over and you pass out from lack of sleep.
Well, I must have missed.
He didn't answer the question, okay? He said he had no deductive argument or rational justification, but that he establishes...
He didn't say he didn't have a rational justification. At least I don't think he did. HogTie, did you actually say during this that you didn't have a rational justification? I know you said you didn't have a deductive argument. But now it sounds like Darth is saying that those are one and the same.
The not God world inductively. Okay, how do you do that? Oh, well, all of the gods that people have presented to me are unsatisfactory, and I just find the naturalism more appealing. Simply accepting a naturalistic explanation is more appealing, okay, or parsimonious, which Occam's razor doesn't even apply here. It doesn't get you to the necessary conclusion that there's no God. So my point is this.
The necessary conclusion? So again, what he's looking for is an argument for the impossibility of God. It has to be necessary that the not God world is the case. So again, he's not asking for a person's reasons. This is how confused this guy has gotten with all this stuff. He's been doing this for so long and conflating and mixing and matching all these kinds of terms that I don't think this is redeemable anymore. He probably, I would suggest he scrap this and try to go back to the drawing board, but this is such a habit now. He's not going to be able to reverse course.
He is suppressing the truth and unrighteousness because, number one, he admitted he's operating from autonomous reasoning, and he completely is violating the very criterion of belief that he uses to dismiss the God world. He
How is he doing that?
completely abandons it when he adopts the not God world.
No, he doesn't. This is the fucked up thing. This is the worst projection of Darth's view onto somebody else. In Darth's worldview, deductive logic seems to be the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that can show necessity, and it's the only thing that's like certainly true. And therefore, an appeal to something like inductive logic, other kinds of logic would be somehow that's just a cop out, right? That's not going to get you there. If you don't have a deductive argument, he said it himself. He thinks that HogTie admitted that he didn't have a deductive argument or a rational justification for it, right? But he basically said he doesn't have a deductive argument, therefore no rational justification for it. But HogTie, several times he said, yes, I have a justification. Yep. But Darth couldn't accept it because he doesn't. I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happened to him. Where the only way, like, if you had to provide your reasons, do you have to provide a deductive syllogism to justify your reasons for liking a particular flavor of ice cream? I mean, granted that we're talking about something like preference and subjective, all that kind of stuff. So it's not slightly fair, but seriously, I mean, what the hell, right? And one of the things that you could do with it, well, how do you know that Rocky Road is your favorite ice cream? Well, because of all the other ice creams that I've tried, this one is the one that, I think is the most delicious. This is the one I prefer. Yeah, but isn't it possible that there's another flavor of ice cream out there that's better than Rocky Road? Sure, it's possible. But you asked me what my reasons were for preferring this one. And my reasons for preferring this one is that out of all the ones that I've tried, this one's the best. It doesn't mean that there isn't something better out there. It also doesn't mean that there is anything better. Rocky Road might actually be your favorite. You could try another 50 flavors, in your life. You could try all the flavors of ice cream. All of them possible. God shows up with the angels of Baskin-Robbins and presents every conceivable flavor of ice cream in the history of in the possibility of the universe. And Rocky Road's still number one.
Because he doesn't have a rational justification. Okay? Invoking that various God concepts are unsatisfactory is not a rational justification that there's no God. Kai Nielsen, the famous atheist author, stated all of the reasons for God might fail, but it still may be the case that God exists. This is the guy who wrote the atheist entry for the Encyclopedia Britannica. I think Britannica thinks he knows a little bit about atheism. Appealing to people's faulty reasonings about what is ultimate, it doesn't follow from that it's faulty, that therefore the conclusion is false. It may be that their reasonings to the conclusion are incorrect. But you see, how patient was I with him, Tonlock? See, Tonlock has witnessed me dealing with HogTie Champ many moons ago on Google+. How patient was I with him? Are you there, Tonlock?
Can I say something, Darth?
He actually, of all the rhetorical questions that he asks, he needed Tone to like, where's my buddy to reaffirm me? Oh my God, that's
Sure, go ahead. Anyone can.
Yeah, like I didn't know he was.
Okay.
You had experience with him with Google Plus. I wasn't aware.
Experience with this guy.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Go, Tom.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he wasn't getting to the point. He just wasn't. And you were talking to him for about 15, 20 minutes altogether, I think. Maybe a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't really get to the point also.
No, he was doing his best impersonation of Matt Dillabloviator.
Yeah, you were patient, Darth. I'll give you that. Yeah, I just didn't hear any.
The fact that people's reasoning for God are unsatisfactory, it doesn't follow necessarily from that the ground of all being is not a mind, meaning God. And you see, the reason why I can say categorically that he's a prime example of suppressing the truth and unrighteousness is because just about everybody listening, including myself, it was very obviously he was just being a chatterbox. He was just being...
HogTie was being the chatterbox. HogTie was being the chatterbox. Look, HogTie asked him if he would allow him some time to fully explain his reasons. And Darth said yes. Darth was going to give him, and then Darth continued to interrupt him and then act impatient because he wasn't getting his answer fast enough. He never really, like, the more you do that, the more you interrupt somebody and then force them to start over again. Yeah, it's going to sound like, yeah, they're, oh, you're just never getting to the point. Well, that happens when you never allow them to get to the point. If you shut up and let them finish their statement, let them run it out, then you don't have to keep asking them to repeat themselves. It might have taken a little less time.
Yeah, chatty Cathy. Blah 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 blah. Was he specifically responding to my question? No, he wasn't.
No, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't. I'm trying to be
He had
nice,
no
but
evidentiary support. His evidentiary support is, well, all of these reasons people tell me for God are unsatisfactory. Well, that's not evidentiary support of the universal that you're in a not God world. And all he's just simply saying is, well, their rationales are unappealing to me or unsatisfactory, and naturalism is appealing to me. It doesn't follow from that you find it appealing, or that to you it makes more sense. That's not a rational justification.
Yeah, and that wasn't that again. That can be a rational justification, but it wouldn't be a deductive one, and that wasn't the point HogTie was trying to bring up. But Darth kept flipping out over the whole. No, this can't possibly work. You can't just say that just because other people's religions get it wrong, and so many religions get it wrong, that there therefore is no God. That's not what he said. He said, because so many religions get it wrong, I'm not inclined to believe, right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, loosely there, but that's sort of HogTie's reasons. We have all these other explanations. There's like, I'm inclined to believe that these are stories, but I don't know that they really there's so many of them, they can't all be true, but they can all be false, to, rip off a common Matt Dillahunty statement. But of course, because I'm not putting that in a deductive argument, I guess it must just, from the jump be false. So there you had it. There was the first one. That one is just the kind of classic, God must exist because you can think kind of argument, I think, from Darth Dawkins, right? He wants to know what the justification is for a not God world. He wants an argument for it, even though he constantly brings up Kai Nielsen, and it just seems to me like the fastest way to turn that around on him is just to point out that, like, even if I provided you with a great argument for the rationality, or you don't even that's not even what he's looking for. He's not looking for the rationality of a not God world. That can be shown, right? HogTie did that. Those were his reasons. But if you're providing a kind of argument for it, whether it's inductive or deductive, Darth is just going to say, well, just because you're providing that argument doesn't mean that there isn't a God. Right. But you asked me for an argument, right? And I can also say that just because my argument for a not God world fails, it doesn't necessarily mean that the not God world isn't the actual state of affairs. Kai Nielsen, bitch. That's really all you have to do. So that was just dealing with, like, and Darth got nowhere with anyone there. In fact, I actually think he probably pulled some people away from thinking that there's a God. And now he's gotten into the realm of, we never got to the point of whether or not that God is Jesus, whether it saves, whether you should believe in it or pray to it or any of that kind of stuff. That comes next. So, kick that out of there. All right, here we go. So this is the next one. With this one, this is the one that's still currently unlisted. Oh, and by the way, welcome, Doubting Thomas. Thanks for joining us. And I want to read this comment before I move on here. HogTie writes, Didi insists that you answer in one sentence and flesh out a full deductive argument referring to every bit of supporting evidence, but then won't let you say one sentence. Right. And then calls you a chatterbox. And then his evidence of you being a quote-unquote chatterbox is how many times you have to restart your explanation because he keeps asking you the same question and never lets you finish the answer, not even once. So like, the biggest waste of time, the common denominator, is Darth. And the over-talking is, if HogTie is a chatterbox, then I don't know what that makes Darth Dawkins. Because I'm pretty sure if you were to do a word counter of that entire exchange, Darth Dawkins is easily talking, is constantly talking over HogTie, constantly. Like I love that. Like if somebody has a decent vocabulary and sets up a lengthy explanation and tries to map out exactly what they're trying to give Darth what it seems like Darth is asking for, and it takes more than 30 seconds to get through. That's when Darth starts acting up and throwing a temper tantrum and making animal noises and and flipping out, right? Like that's not what he's actually looking for, right? He's looking for a dopamine hit. He wants something reactive, something pithy that he can go up against. He just wants a slogan. As much as he complains about atheist cliches, I think that's all he's actually fishing for. He wants an atheist cliche that he can rage mic at. So this one is a conversation. Jay Robbins started this one, and this was from May 1st, so yeah, about a week ago. When he pulled this one up, I was listening while I was at work, and this popped up, and I was surprised that it showed up because of my history being blocked by these guys. When it popped up, it was about 11, oh, I don't know, it was right around lunchtime, so I'm thinking maybe Jay Robbins was on lunch. One of his usual, like, you got 30 seconds, atheists, get in here and give me what you owe me kind of, bullshit clubhouse rooms. And so I jumped into the audience. I think he invited me up to talk, but I couldn't because I was just listening in, while I was taking care of work shit. But Darth comes in eventually at some point, and then Mac Gruber, Mac's right there. Actually, you can see him on the screen next to David. And these two are going to have a little conversation. And keep in mind, Mac has been persuaded by Darth. So that's setting this stuff up. Now we're going to get into not so much because Mac is already past the point. Think of it this way. Imagine if Mac were HogTie, if Darth had convinced HogTie that he was right. That HogTie has now come to the conclusion, you know what? You're right, Darth. I agree with your argument. There has to be a God. There has to be an ultimate foundation to all of this reality, and it has to be a personal mind. Take it away, Mac.
All right, morning, everyone. If you are an atheist,
And this is
you're
super
welcome
quiet.
to raise your hand and come up stage. Have about 30
Is that
minutes,
really quiet for everybody else too?
But if you're an atheist and you think in those 30 minutes you can explain how it is the case that there is no God, you're more than welcome to do so. Just let me know in the chat if I'm not coming in clearly or if I'm like very...
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing that one. Let me find another source here. There were a few people that recorded this. Sorry for the delay, folks. All right, let's try this one.
Hey, Darth. Hey, everyone in the audience. Again, the room is open for anyone who wants to come on stage and explain within the next 30 minutes that I'm here how it is the case that there is no God. Now, every time I've brought these timed challenges, it doesn't seem to be the case that anyone's been able to answer the question, which is unfortunate, especially considering the fact that atheists frequently present themselves as people who are the height of rationality, the pinnacle of rational thought. You'd think that in much less than 30 seconds, somebody could present a coherent, plain English, honest answer to the question, honest defense of atheism. But that doesn't seem to be the case. But if you think you're the first one that can do so, if you think today is the day that atheism can be finally and completely rationally defended, you're more than welcome to raise your hand. Mac, is your microphone doing better? Oh, go ahead, Darth.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Oh, you're good now. You're good now.
Yeah, that's coming out on my phone. I want to use.
So just to clarify, for anybody that didn't watch it, because I do want to cover the conversation, because I think some interesting things were brought up. Pine Creek and Mac had a conversation a little while ago, and I think it was. I'm starting to blank on the timing of this. I don't know if he was on before or after this. I don't know which one came first. But Mac, under the name of Kent, was on Pine Creek's show and had a conversation with him for about 15, 20 minutes. And he was kind of affirming this kind of same thing. Like he was an atheist. He used to make fun of a lot of these guys. And to be fair, Mac does still poke fun at some of the stuff that Dee and J. Robin do. Their kind of style of argument. And he their conversation kind of goes into how he kind of how he was convinced by the presuppositional apologetic, and then he's kind of moving towards Christianity. So that in mind, he's here essentially to talk to Darth Dawkins, and Jay Robin is like, hey, you know what? I've been listening to you guys, and so he's in agreement with him. Not to set that up, but I probably will cover like his conversation later on with Pine Creek. I won't. I don't think I'm gonna have time to do it today. But yeah, this gets kind of interesting. So, and there's been some accusations that people are not certain if Mac might be trolling them or trolling us or trolling everybody or whatever. But for the purposes of what he's trying to present here with the argument, I mean, you can see it and judge it for yourself. It sounds to me like he has a fairly decent handle on what Darth and J. Robin are trying to present, and it sounds to me like he's decently persuaded of it. But that's not going to be enough.
My headset. I'll figure it out.
Okay, no problem. So are you an atheist, Mac?
Recently, but no longer.
Oh, really? Okay, what are you?
I am I guess, presuppositionalist theist, working out kind of the Bible.
Okay.
Okay, so in one sentence, why do you now believe in God?
Because God is the necessary precondition for intelligibility. Like atheists keep dodging the fact that I think God does not exist.
Wait a minute. It might be the case that in order for there to be intelligibility, God must exist, right? But what if intelligibility is simply an illusion and you think you have it when you don't?
Interesting, right? So why is Darth Dawkins playing devil's advocate here? Like, I'm pretty sure he's using this as sort of a litmus test. He wants to see if this guy's really thought this through. But it's interesting that he went to that example. What if intelligibility is simply an illusion, right? Well, he could have done the whole thing like, what if, this is frequently used when a lot of Christians will appeal to Revelation. How do you know it's God revealing it to you?
Well,
I mean,
that things are intelligible.
I mean, you're on the right path, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but I'm trying to be.
You actually are trying to give him a hard time, Darth. I don't know why you would say that you're not. That would be the whole
be a bit more informative. The only reason that we can invoke God, all right, the only one, is because God takes the initiative to construct this world in a way where he reveals himself.
Well, that's what I just said. I said, like, because he revealed it, did he not?
Okay, I didn't hear that part.
It's because
it's because you were too busy trying to play devil's advocate rather than listening to what he was saying. But that I think is kind of interesting that God took time to create. He took the time. Is that how he put it? He made time to create the world and then reveal it to us. I think both of those things would be the exact same thing.
My microphone's crap.
Yeah, because if it is not accepted that this world, in terms of its totality, indicates God's eternal powers and attributes, according to Romans 1, then one will be adopting and avowing that all the facts do not necessitate referencing God. But that could never be. Excuse me, I just had some coffee.
And sounds like he spilled it on himself. How could intelligibility be an illusion? For the illusion to be intelligible, there must be intelligibility. Right? Yeah. I don't understand this either. Like, well, what if it's just we have the semblance of it? Well, that's what we have now, right? If we're creaturely minds, actually, I didn't think about that deeply. If we're creaturely minds and revelation is necessary from this super mind, then the only reason we have intelligibility is because we're allowed a glimpse at it. which also raises a lot more questions about what Darth thinks intelligibility is and isn't.
That could never be defended. So I'm glad you become a God believer. Now, do you believe in the Christian God?
Yeah, it seems that it's like it's the Christian God, because only
It
the Christian
seems that way.
Well, yeah, because next to the Caligula is a Muslim presuppositionalist, but it doesn't work because
it doesn't work. Yeah.
because the claims of Islam are not coherent in that the Quran is contradictory. God mischaracterizes certain things, says that the stars are missiles used by devils, et cetera, et cetera. So that's
okay. Well,
as opposed to us being the sky. There's a firmament in the Bible. I don't understand why that gets a pass, but the stars as missiles thing doesn't.
Have you come? And I'm not trying to give you a hard time. Have you come to the point in your life where you realized if you were to die in a car accident, you would go to hell?
Boom, there it is. Wrathy God, right? So Mac has made it past the point where HogTie so fiendishly frustrated Darth Dawkins in the previous conversation, right? And I think these actually happen. These conversations happened within like 24 hours. HogTie's was the night before this happened. So he couldn't talk HogTie into acknowledging the necessity of that God existing, right? And that's what Darth's whole shtick is. You need to understand that this God is a necessarily existing being, whatever that God is. If somebody in that point of the conversation, Jay Robin is a great example of this. If you jump too fast and being like, well, why should I think Jesus is a necessary? Like, oh, did I say Jesus? Did I mention the Bible at all? I'm just talking about God. Just talking about God. God has to be a necessarily existing being. And then we can get into then we can get into what God it is, right? The fact that they think that that's like somehow going to work theologically is fucked up. But now he's at the point where he's like, okay, so this guy seems to have passed the smell test. Have you made it to a point where you realize that if you died in a car accident, you would go to hell?
Would I go to hell? Well, again, that depends if Calvinism is true, for instance, because if Calvinism is true, then I might be going to heaven or hell either way.
No, sir. The discussion of Calvinism or not Calvinism is not really germane to what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, because you're talking about how people are saved.
What I want to know is, have you come to the point in your life where you realized that were your heart to stop, that you would be awaiting Judgment Day, and on Judgment Day you would be eternally separated from God? Have you come to that realization?
How did he come to that? If he has come to that realization, how did he do it? Was it a rational process, or did the Holy Spirit guide him there? That's why that conversation about Calvinism is germane. Because for some people, some believers, they never even really talk about this. It's about you getting to that space in your head, mentally, right? Realizing that, oh God, I'll be judged forever if I don't repent right away. And that's, right? But in other theologicals, the only reason you get to that headspace is because the Holy Spirit is working on your heart. It's already begun that regeneration. And Darth has just told this guy who's convinced of presuppositionalism, but maybe not totally committed to Christianity, that the discussion of Calvinism is not germane to this topic. That's fucked up.
If I don't believe in Jesus, yes.
Okay. Now, have you turned to God, crying out for Him to save your soul from eternal damnation?
I've cried out to God saying that I need to surrender my autonomous reasoning, and that.
No, I don't need you to parrot my phraseology when I'm, shooting my mouth off.
Well,
I want a sincere answer.
No, I haven't done that yet.
Have you noticed he's treating him like he would treat any atheist? Still.
Okay. Well, then you're not really believing on the Christian God yet. You're just realizing the truth of his revelation. Okay.
So there is a two-part process, right? This is something that has been asked of these guys before. Okay, so let's say that I completely agree that I think there has to be some kind of supernatural being that exists out there that's responsible for all of creation and is responsible for our ability to navigate it and make any kind of intelligible sense out of it. Let's say that I concede all of that. Now what?
So to sufficiently believe in the God of Christianity, it's not enough that we give intellectual assent that he is the necessary precondition for everything and that he's revealed himself. We have to, once we have a proper conceptualization of God, we will recognize that he is entirely, completely righteous, holy, and just. And when we have that proper conceptualization, this will bring about immediate realization of our utter condition before God, which is we are under his wrath.
Under his wrath. Okay, here we go. Let me wind that back. There's something.
We have to, once we have a proper conceptualization of God, we will recognize that he is entirely, completely righteous, holy.
Where is that in the Bible? Once we have a proper conceptualization of God. Once we have the proper conceptualization, then we realize what?
Holy and just.
Then we realize he's holy and just. How would we get there? What's the proper conceptualization of God then? Just that it's an ultimate being? And then once we've got that proper conceptualization done, it just follows from that proper conceptualization that being is also holy and just. How? How do you make that connection?
And when we have that proper conceptualization, this will bring about immediate realization of our utter condition before God, which is we are under his wrath. Right? It would be.
How do you get there? You have an ultimate being that created the universe. That's a proper conception of God. It's an ultimate being responsible for the creation of everything, and it is a mind. And from that, I'm supposed to gather that it is also holy and just, and that I am worthy of its punishment. How did I get there what did I get there from?
Be like if you and a buddy were hiking and you were walking across some train tracks.
Here we go. The train. This will be great.
And you got a piece of your apparel stuck in the train tracks, and all of a sudden you hear the train screaming down the tracks, and in about 30 seconds you're going to be splattered like dog food all over the tracks.
Pleasant image.
And you realize your utter doom, right? Because you're pulling on your apparel that's stuck in the train track. It's not working. And you cry out to your friend to assist you, which will be the only way that you will escape getting killed by the train. Well, similarly, we have to cry out to God because it's the only way that we can be rectified. One must recognize one's doom first, one's condemnation, and that there is no escape unless God reaches out and grants us forgiveness because of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. But we cry out to him to save us. We have to first recognize that we have rabies in order to be saved from rabies.
No, you don't, actually. That analogy fails automatically. But let's talk about the first one first, and we'll get into why Darth doesn't understand rabies. So you're walking along the tracks with a friend, and then you get stuck in the track somehow, and the train is oncoming, and you can't free yourself, and you need help, and you cry out to your friend for help. Who's God in this analogy? Because based on what I can see, I guess your buddy is Jesus, and God is the train. But that means your buddy is the train. You're not crying out for your buddy to help you get away from God. That's not how this works. Jesus is the train, and you're asking him to hit the brakes. And actually, in order for this analogy to work, what you're asking Jesus to do is to take your place. Acknowledge that he took your place. Right? You don't. Right. This brings it like I have to ask Jesus to free me from the tracks so that Jesus can stand there and take the full force of that train right on the chin for my sins. One of us has to die on those tracks. It's going to be me. But the train has provided my friend to get run over in my place. That's the nature of this relationship. Not, there's this powerful oncoming force that, and it's unstoppable and it's going to kill me. And if I don't realize that I need help from it and I don't cry out for mercy, I won't get the help I need from that thing to save me from that same thing. This analogy of the train doesn't work because, better pictured, the force that's happening that's the wrath. So the train, I guess, is supposed to not be God, but it's just God's wrath, and my buddy is also God. But you have to finish the narrative for Christianity to work. Jesus doesn't just grab you and take you away from the wrath. Jesus has to take the full force of that wrath on himself. Someone has to die under that train. That's not a great narrative, right? And you have to wonder, why? Why can't the train just stop? Why do both of us have to die? Why does anyone have to die? Because God's wrath is coming, whether you want it or not. The issue with Christianity isn't like God's wrath, and this is weird to me. In Judaism, God's wrath can be at least redirected or mollified or whatever if you do what He says, right? It's no different than living under a protection racket, right? You piss off the boss, he comes down, he's gonna punish you. You make amends, he won't punish you, and you make extra special amends, maybe he'll even reward you, right? That makes sense. It's a basic transactional kind of relationship. But in this one, you have that kind of thing going on, but it really doesn't work that way. God doesn't withhold his wrath because you do the right thing. God has to get the wrath out. It's inevitable, right? And you can't do anything to stop it, but God can by taking his wrath out on himself. So
that we will then be motivated to go to somebody who can administer the vaccine. And without the administering of the vaccine, we're doomed to die of rabies.
Well, you're doomed if you don't know that you have rabies and you wait too long. No administration of the vaccine is even going to work. Also, if someone suspects that you have rabies and can find out, whether you know it or not, they can administer the vaccine and prevent you from getting the disease, and you don't have to understand rabies. Like, how does this work on somebody who's just does not have the intellectual capacity to understand they're infected with rabies? That doesn't mean they can't be protected from it. They can't be saved from it. This analogy makes no damn sense.
That's an analogy of what it means to believe on Jesus Christ as Savior. Do you have a Bible?
Like online.
Okay, well, that's fine. Read the Gospel of John and read the first 5 books of Romans, okay? But be careful sharing with people that your mind has been changed, because this is going to cause a great deal of angst and anguish for unbelievers, especially on Clubhouse.
I know.
They're horrified that anybody would be influenced by the message that we have.
I keep asking them to like, have on Grug Pill, have on Darth, have on J. Robin, have on Tone Loc, and they just dismissive. And I'm like, well, like Darth, we've had our differences, but I think like you're one of the best debaters on the platform, and I'm like, it's a shame that people don't see past what they think is, your personality, no offense, and what they see as your personality.
I am so offended.
Well, yeah, but what I meant is that like they don't see past the, what they see as,
Look, if
the idiosyncrasies of specific debaters, not just you, but others.
Look, if somebody treats me like an adult and they act in adult manner, they can vigorously disagree with me all day long and I'm not going to get indignant. But when people start lying to my face, don't lie to me.
Yeah, that's the problem, though, because vigorous disagreement and lie, there's a thin line between those, and Darth has a very idiosyncratic take on which one is which. And it seems to depend on his mood and his patience at the time. I think this is interesting. Mac mentioned something. I know Mac. I've texted with Mac on a couple of different platforms, so he's mentioned this before about people, having, oh, you should challenge him. I've challenged him. Darth has been challenged lots of times by me specifically and by many others. If you want to come on the show, you're more than welcome. Just let me know. Darth actively goes out of his way to block me. Darth doesn't want to be quote-unquote challenged. He simply doesn't want to talk to me. He can write off any of his ideological opponents by simply saying they're not worth talking to. That's it. J. Robin has done the same thing. If they wanted to reach out to me and they wanted to have a conversation about their views, they can always come on. They could reach out and ask. I don't ask them anymore because it doesn't make a difference. But you ask 6 or 7 times and get laughed at 6 or 7 times. That's enough, right? They know that the invitation's there. At this point, they wouldn't do it because Darth would probably make the excuse that he doesn't want to. He doesn't want. I just want the views, and Darth's not going to help me with that. J. Robin probably would too. Although J. Robin's actually been on the show, to be fair. He came on the show with me and Tom Rabbittt. So, and Darth's been on once, but he's never been back since. So this idea of like, I don't understand why they don't engage with him. Like, that's not the kind of dynamic that Darth has fostered over his years being on things like Discord and Clubhouse. He actively distanced himself from these people. With the exception of criticism, he'll still continue to criticize people, right? Like, he'll drop my name as often as possible because he doesn't like my videos. I'm sure he's watching a few of them. I don't know that he watches all of them, but I'm sure he's watched some. And I know that he pays attention to the titles because he's accused me of just using Darth Dawkins' name as a way to get views, which may or may not be true. It sometimes helps. Not as much as J. Robin's name, though.
Okay. You know what? I'm a 61-year-old man. I know when people are lying and being deceptive and evasive. Okay?
No, you don't. Darth loses his cool and then thinks that when he's getting something that he completely disagrees with, or if somebody's missing the point or not going down the right path, he thinks that they're lying. Right? He assumes malice when you could just as easily assume confusion. And the fact that he's willing to go to malice instead of confusion says a lot about his personality and his character. And the fact that if he's been doing this for a decade, that's the habit that he's developed, it's not a good sign.
I consider them lying when I confront them that they're being deceptive and evasive as giving both middle fingers, okay? And I'm going to get indignant, all right? Because I have an expectation that people aren't going to treat me that way or treat other people that way. Just don't lie, okay? I have plenty of conversations where I'm cool, calm, and collected because people aren't lying. That's simple.
No, it's not that simple. It's simple to declare opponents liars, but he can't demonstrate that they're lying. You could demonstrate that they might be confused, or they might not be on the right track, they might be misunderstanding him. Those things you could probably demonstrate. But you need to, like, if you're going to accuse somebody of lying, you need to be able to demonstrate that they know the opposite of what they're saying, that they're actively trying to deceive you, that they're saying something that they know to be false. And you probably, the fact that he wouldn't be able to get out of that bind because he just thinks that Romans 1, Paul has made it so that that's, anyone who's denying the truth and unrighteousness is a liar, I guess, by Darth's standard, which might be a standard more strict than what Paul set up.
Right, I got a mute, so have a good one.
Okay.
And,
So last night we had an encounter with HogTie Champ where he did his usual bloviating and repeating the same gobbledygook that he has going back 10 years on Google+.
There you go, HogTie Champ. He's talking about you again, and your usual bloviating for a decade or so.
Are you acquainted with HogTie Champ, J. Robin?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, remember that name, HogTie Champ. What he will do when you talk with him, he will be cordial for the most part, but he will just bloviate upon bloviating upon bloviating. And so I said to him last night, Explain to me what is your rational justification for the not God world? And after we distill out all of the bloviating that he did, I mean, it was just bloviating. I mean, he really gave a Charlie Brown's teacher a run for her money, you know, wah, 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 wah. And he finally came down to, well, the not God world is true because all of the local gods that people had presented to me are just unconvincing, and that because naturalism is appealing, right? And this is somebody who many atheists from the Discord and Google Plus community have high regard for. This is what it's come down to. Naturalism is appealing.
Well, it's the best they have. So,
yeah.
Yeah, Darth is sick of these bloviators, bloviatingly. That's hard to say as an adverb. Bloviatingly. Um, Darth. Like, he's like, okay, so he's aware of HogTie. He knows that HogTie has been on these social media platforms for about as long as he has. He's well aware of him, knows his style, familiar with him, but then has to bring him like, oh, he's just giving Charlie Brown's teacher a run for his money. From what I heard there, I didn't hear anything from HogTie that didn't make sense. I heard plenty of things coming from HogTie that I know from experience that Darth is going to categorize as not being sufficient deductive arguments or whatever. He's going to try to categorize them as being lacking the burden of proof that he's looking for. But you know what? HogTie doesn't owe him a burden of proof. You asked him for his reasons for disbelief, and he gave them to you. And then you shifted that like he owes you an explanation, like you're looking to get a verdict out of a court. HogTie doesn't owe you that. No one owes Darth that. And anybody that gets concerned, if anybody has a conversation with somebody who acts like this, take a deep breath and realize that this person isn't owed shit. And there's nothing wrong necessarily. Like, you could have bad beliefs. You could believe things we all do. We have blind spots. We believe things probably on bad evidence. There's all sorts of different things that we have. But if you have your reasons for not believing in God, and most I think for most people the biggest reason is that they think it's not real. They think it's a story, like HogTie was saying, right? HogTie is trying to give the reasons why he thinks it's just a story, because there's so many other stories and none of those are right too, right? There's an inductive reason to kind of build up to that. And some Christian comes out like, no, that doesn't follow. You need to prove that mine is absolutely necessarily 100% certainty completely wrong. No, you don't need to prove that to them. That's not something that you need to do. And the fact that they're telling you that you have to do that is really kind of beyond the scope of even their religious belief. Because now things have gotten out of hand. I really think that this is kind of a connection. This is probably why I'm probably going to end this here pretty quick. Let me play this out for a quick moment, and then I'm going to end with some closing thoughts and then wrap this up.
He did his very best to try and avoid to answer that question directly, right? He pointed to 3 different criteria Christians would use to try and convince somebody that God exists, and then you cut him off at the pass there, and so he didn't have that anymore. And then you kept asking him the same question, and he says, well, I don't have any deductive arguments, reasoning, or proof that God doesn't exist. It's all inductive.
Yeah. Well, how inductively do you establish the universal of the not God world? Because
you didn't ask him for that, Darth. You asked him what his reasons were for not believing. You didn't ask him to establish that. That's presenting an argument. And even if you present a deductive argument, that doesn't establish that. You can make an argument for that. That's not the establishment of the thing as an actual fact. And if Darth thinks that that's how deductive syllogisms work somehow, you make the argument and it makes reality thus and so, then he thinks that deductive logic is a kind of magic. HogTie writes, literally not once did I say naturalism is appealing. No. Nope, he didn't. Darth took that from him. Darth claimed that's what HogTie said. And now, and Mac is kind of going on like, oh, well, yeah, no, you cut him off at the pass there. You cut him off at the pass with some of these other attempts to explain away this kind of stuff. He wasn't attempting to dodge the burden of presenting an argument. Darth didn't ask him about an argument. He asked him for his reasons why. And HogTie was attempting to give them, and Darth immediately started foaming at the mouth and talking about something else, something that he actually wanted, instead of being clear and circumspect with his question and saying, what I want you to do is present an argument that demonstrates the necessity of a not God world. That's why he was getting frustrated. That's what he should have asked HogTie. And if HogTie said, "Oh, I don't have one," then they could have just ended the conversation there. If you don't want to get frustrated in a conversation, and this is to Darth Dawkins, don't tell people, "Hey, what are your reasons for not believing?" and then act like what they should be doing, holding them to the standard that they need to be presenting a deductive argument. That's not honest, and that's not a good way to argue with anyone. Because it sounds like what you're doing is you're engaging them in a casual conversation where we're going to be talking about our beliefs and our differences and our similarities. And then you spin it up into, no, actually what we were doing is we're comparing different types of deductive arguments or non-deductive, or deductive syllogisms for and against the existence of God. Oh, okay. I thought you just wanted to know why I wasn't a Christian, but I see we've switched gears. And you didn't give any indication, right? He doesn't say, no, this is actually what I want. I'm sorry, you may have misunderstood. He blames the person for misunderstanding what he was trying to sneak in. It's just, I mean, he's just being abusive. It doesn't seem like he's being abusive. That's being abusive. Telling somebody one thing and then they're responding to it, and then you react angrily and accuse them of being dishonest or being inconsistent or being stupid or being tricky with you because they're not providing you with what you implied, blaming them for not living up to something you didn't ask for. That's textbook abusive behavior. The fact that this appeals to Mac, I think, is a problem. And Mac, if you are listening, you might want to think about that. The way that this guy is talking to people, that Darth Dawkins refers to people, the way he sets these kinds of conversations up is extremely abusive. I don't know if you have any experience with abusive personalities. You may not have, but this is not persuasive to me. I have had a decent amount, not too close in the family. Fortunately, I've been lucky enough, but enough dealing with abusive personalities to recognize this. I can smell this shit coming around a corner, which is why I focus on this guy, because that's what he's on here to do. He doesn't want to change minds. He wants to abuse people. This is his dopamine hit. Christianity appeals to Darth Dawkins because people are going to get punished. That's a huge dopamine hit for him. And in the meantime, he's going to satisfy himself with getting a dopamine hit by meting out some of that punishment rhetorically by browbeating them online.
Not God world, conceptually speaking, is a universal declaration, as is the God world. Right? They're both stipulations of universality.
J. Robin, you might not recognize the name from Discord, but you've talked to HogTie over in a couple of the Discord servers before.
Oh, really? He had a different Discord name?
No, he had the same name. You just might not recognize it, but you've talked to him before.
Okay.
Suppose I were to say, well, all of the reasons that people have given me for their unbelief are unconvincing, and that I find theism appealing. Would they accept that as a rationale for the God world? No, they wouldn't.
A rationale? I would accept it as one of your reasons for it. I accept that from Christians all the time. I like Christianity, or I like Islam, or I'm fascinated with Buddhism. What's your reason for being involved in that particular faith tradition over another one? I prefer it, or I like it. I like the people. I like some of the messages. I like some of the teachings that they have. That's reason enough. I don't then combat them. Well, oh yeah, well, can you prove to me the necessity of their worldview? And if you can't, then you're full of shit. And I think Buddhism is a waste of time, or Sikhism is a waste of time, or Hinduism, or Islam, or Christianity, or Catholicism, whatever you want to point out to. You could take just as obnoxious an approach as Darth is taking. What's their rationale? They like it. There's a community there. There's people there that are supporting them. There's a sense of comfort there. Those are reasons to like something. The kind of Christianity that Darth Dawkins is talking about, the one where you go it alone on social media all the time and you don't have a community, from what I can tell. I don't know if he has a congregation of people that, based on the way he talks to people, I doubt very highly he believes in things like community and support structures and getting affirmation from people that love you and care for you and are willing to, help you when times are good or even times are bad, right? I don't think Darth's going for that. So why does Darth like his particular brand of religion? For exactly the reasons that I said. God is coming back and he's going to fuck up the people that hurt Darth. And Darth gets a great big old dopamine high from that. And like I said, in the meantime, he is rationing out those dopamine hits by being on here. He's just chasing a high like anybody else. I'm kind of chasing a dopamine high myself because the one thing I hate seeing are people who are abusive. And when I see them anywhere being abusive, I like to point it out and I like to ridicule them. That kind of gets me off.
But that's precisely what he did. Yeah, that's exactly what he was saying. Okay. And this is a guy who puts himself forward as trying to be intellectual and articulate and thoughtful in his presentation.
I've talked to HogTie Champ. He is articulate and thoughtful. I don't know if I would classify him as an intellectual, like an academic or something. I don't know what HogTie's credentials are, but he is thoughtful and he is articulate. I don't think you could say he's not that. How did Darth write those qualities off? He's a chatterbox. That's Darth Dawkins is for articulate and thoughtful. Oh, you're just talking too much. You're using too many words. You're explaining it too much. What I want you to give me is something inflammatory that I can react to. Give it to me now. I need you to illustrate in your words and in your deeds what a disgusting, nasty atheist you are so I can stomp you out and get my fix. HogTie writes, thanks for playing this whining session. This is the first I've heard of this extended crying in beer session. Yeah, no, this hasn't been posted by anybody. I don't know if anybody else is working on this, but I had asked people. Like I said, I was in the beginning of this and listened to it about up to this point, and then I had to leave. And then I thought, because I was in there, I would have the opportunity to watch it later on replay. And then I was denied the replay. Fortunately, people recorded it, and I was able to wick this up. So, yeah, this hasn't shown up anywhere yet. So, exclusive to Jefferson Spatchcock, by way of my brother and that British guy.
Of his atheism. I mean, pretty pathetic. When they say naturalism is appealing, pregnant within that claim is that naturalism is in some way coherent. But naturalism is not coherent. Because when you invoke naturalism, you're invoking a unimaginable plurality of things. Well, what is it that unifies any of the plurality of things? What makes that unity real? Okay. In the not God world.
I don't know why you'd have to. What does this have to do with anything that he was talking about? Who is he fucking talking to?
You don't have God as the concrete universal, as the all conditioner, as the supreme being and creator who institutes the plurality of things and imposes various levels of unity among the diversity of things. So what makes the unity among diversity real that provides for the intelligibility? And another thing, within naturalism, what is the fundamental parameter of why anything at all exists? Well, they have none. They have nothing that is identifiable or defensible. So therefore, all of the particulars within the set that they call naturalism are brute fact.
What is identifiable about a deity that you cannot that exists beyond the scope of space and time? Within it supposedly exists within and without the natural world. Like, I would agree with him that naturalism probably doesn't lead to an explanation as to the why of things, but it does probably help us figure out the how of things, which has kind of replaced things, I think, in a lot of emphasis, right? Science explains how things go about working. But science doesn't do a great job or even really attempt to do the job of explaining what those things are in some fundamental way or why they exist. Those are different questions, right? And I don't think that it's entirely fair for people to get for people to attempt to think that, like, well, maybe if we can explain more of the how, that's enough. I don't know that that's entirely enough because we still have questions. Human minds are just going to go there. But the one thing that I think is not particularly valuable about that distinction, where science explains the how and philosophy tends to ask these questions about the what and the why, the one thing that science needs to understand, or people that are appealing to science need to understand, that science isn't engaged in that practice of philosophy, right? It's trying to explain how things work, how things do, so we can make predictions, right? We can make predictions and we can make models, and those help us. Those give us tools that improve our survival, right? But it doesn't really tell us much about the what and the how. But it might inform us a little bit about some of the parameters of those things. And so it's necessary, I think, for both of these disciplines to be aware of each other and to be informed of what the other is doing. So while science understands that what it's looking for is how it understands its limitations, but philosophy, while it's trying to answer the what and the why, It's looking to science and science's explanations about the how. And sometimes those explanations about how things work, how they function in science, do inform what we can imagine about what things are and why they are. And so what Darth is doing here, just sort of going after naturalism, is just the sort of usual evangelical kind of, Christian thing of like, no, that any of this kind of philosophy is bad because naturalism assumes that there is no God and therefore nothing works. No, actually, that's not true. But Darth is actually one of these people that I think probably believes that the only good scientists are ones that are believers too. So naturalism and science and philosophies of science, those can be useful to believers who are engaged in science, in the same way that they're useful to any non-believer. But for some strange reason, it'd be better if you were a believer and a scientist too. So I always find this kind of weird. If he's trying to lay this kind of thing on where people are taking naturalism and trying to use that as a replacement for God, yeah, that probably might be a little bit misplaced. But the idea that someone is inclined to think and has reasons to think that from nature, that's all we've got, right? That might be all that there is. There isn't necessarily anything irrational about that stance, and there's good arguments for that. I think they're probably better for epistemology. Ontologically, they get a little bit fuzzier.
Facts, because they have no fundamental or final reason why anything is. And if there's no fundamental reason why anything is, can be, or cannot be, then you don't have intelligibility for the totality of all the particulars. So how is that appealing? Well, there's one reason why it is because in that incoherent system, right, it provides them with pseudo-intellectual satisfaction that they can cling to their autonomy of reason. The one good thing we had yesterday was that HogTie admitted that there was a true dichotomy. Either the mind of God is autonomous and the mind of man is creaturely, and if not, then the individual will believe that their mind is autonomous because it is not to be considered creaturely, right? And so this is the...
Yeah, and that's one part. I don't know if that's precisely what HogTie thought he was agreeing to. Because usually with a dichotomy, it is the thing or it's the absence of the thing. Like it either is the case or it's not that. But what he seems to be saying, he's already changing this. Darth's doing what he did kind of at the first video that I mentioned, that weird argument. Like, oh, well, then you have to assume that the mind is completely independent. That's not really the dichotomy, though. Right? It either is it is the case that there's this autonomous mind and that our minds are dependent upon it, or it's not the case that doesn't necessarily mean that the mind would be completely independent of anything at all.
The motivation for unbelievers to collect cliches, slogans, catchphrases for why they don't have a reason to believe in God. They're trying desperately to preserve their autonomy rather than acknowledge the autonomy of the mind of God. Now, if we have any unbelievers who want to come up and want to challenge anything that's said or explain to us why atheism or unbelief in the God of Christianity is worthy of belief, come on up.
I don't think anyone does. And I think this goes quiet after this point because this has been on for about 16 minutes. Yeah.
Pork Chop, would you cue your boombox and play the Jeopardy theme music while we're waiting for unbelievers who have intestinal fortitude come up?
Yeah, that's what you need to do. You need to have somebody be to actually score the obnoxiousness that you're trying to bring to a Clubhouse room.
Oh man,
Awesome.
That song's going to play so long it's going to give me a headache.
By the way, I love your avatar.
It really triggers the Hebrew Israelites.
I think that's pretty much it for it. There's a long stretch of silence here. Eventually, J. Robin dips out. I think the stretch of silence goes on for quite a while. And then I think a few people come in there and get kind of the usual Darth Dawkins treatment. I've watched bits and pieces of the rest of it, but it wasn't as interesting as that. I think, and Mac had to mute. I don't think he comes back. But that's pretty much it. So that's what I wanted to lay out was sort of the kind of 1-2 punch there. So first is trying to browbeat somebody into assuming that epistemologically you have to agree to the necessity of this ultimate being, which is a mind. And then in this circumstance, in order to really get into Darth's Grace, is you have to understand that that thing is your buddy that might help you off the tracks if you ask him first, but he's also the speeding train of wrath about to cream both you and your friend. The interesting thing, the other thing I didn't bring up about that little argument about you and your buddy walking down the tracks and the train is oncoming, your friend can step off, but you can't because your clothes are caught, is that you have to ask your friend for help. Your friend's not just going to do it. Right? I mean, I think most of us could imagine a scenario where the one kid's like, "Oh, at last my clothes are stuck and I can't get myself free. You get away from here. Don't try to save me." Right? And the kid's like, "No, I'm not going to take that advice. I'm going to free your leg so that you don't get killed by the train." Right? Isn't that what a good person would do? But we're to believe that Jesus wouldn't do that. Jesus needs you to realize that you need help, and then he'll free you from the train tracks. But if you stand there and like, "No, this is what I wanted. I've always wanted to be killed by your dad." And Jesus just has to stick his hands in his pockets and watches the Yahweh train turns you into dog food, as Darth Dawkins said. I mean, there's a lot of problems with this narrative. There's always been a lot of problems with the Christian narrative. It's why I'm not a Christian. And when I hear guys like Darth Dawkins try to lay out these little analogies, and all you do is just apply the parameters of the narrative, if it goes back into those metaphors, the metaphor starts to fall apart. So that's kind of where we're at. Jeff, can't we just listen to the silence? I haven't dedicated any shows to them, but maybe I will. But there are YouTube. I think you can probably find some YouTube channels that are more into that, Russ. I think you can do the ASMR ones where you just listen to somebody eat a bag of chips or something like that. But yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Final thoughts on this one. This was one that I wanted to do. This is sort of a pet project of mine because I thought that this one got into how bad Darth's metaphors are about the actual theological implications of his religion, and his last conversation with HogTie is just a textbook example of where he goes wrong and trying to use what he thinks is some kind of bulletproof logical thinking on somebody when all he's doing is constantly shifting the burden. And shifting the parameters of the discussion, often implicitly and without warning, and then accusing the other person of being a liar when they don't keep up with all the little subtle key changes he's doing throughout his little song and dance routine. And to address an issue that came up before, because somebody was asking about it. So the House of Comments, I think was his name. So I don't usually block people on here, but something about that really pissed me off. I do not like that kind of winking, ironic fascism kind of stuff. And I know somebody had pointed out, well, Vosh and users like Vosh and Hassan Abi and a few other people have tried to reclaim some of this kind of iconography for the left. They may have. That wasn't entirely the reason. So if it makes it sound like I'm just going to like a zero tolerance, kind of person when it comes to like, any kind of jokes or something like that that might be out of bounds. That's not entirely it. But given the shit that's been going on with sort of the Roe v. Wade and listening to some of these other sources that I've been hearing with this sort of like radical Christian fascists dancing around the war fire because they think that Roe v. Wade is, if it gets removed, then now abortion is illegal. That's actually not the case. But it does make it easier for them on the local level to make abortion illegal. In some states, it's going to automatically happen just because of the way the law works. They had state laws on file that way. What I'm getting kind of what I'm losing my tolerance of is this notion that a lot of these people who are coming from things like this kind of winking alt-right bullshit where they're not fascist, they're reactionary, or they're bitching about liberalism, and they're conflating an old term of liberalism, which can actually be kind of cozy with fascism, with the kind of current liberalism or social liberalism that happens kind of in the United States, which is just tolerance for the LGBTQ community, and maybe they believe in social welfare systems. And they're sort of conflating and melding a lot of these terms. And all I'm seeing is an increase in the boldening of the 33 to 38% of the American population that wants to see, America get quote unquote great again, or some equivalent of that, by reducing people's freedoms, but not Americans' freedoms. Americans are going to be fine. It's those not real Americans that are going to get it. And by not real Americans, I think we all know what they mean by that. And that bothers the shit out of me, because what we end up having is these little slogans and these little messages that they just keep pumping out, and they do it on social media most of all. They've got a decent spot on in social media to do this kind of stuff. And it's just sort of jaded, cynical bullshit that it's just a signal to their own that what they're looking for is a society that really doesn't care about anything other than the society conforming to some special notion or some perfect pure notion of how they think things should be. And that's not how a country should work. That's not really how a society should work. You shouldn't abstract your goals and then force people to fit things into it. That's how you get the totalitarianism that right wingers used to be terrified of. At least the right wingers in the United States who tended to be on the libertarian side. They didn't want to see a government that ran from that perspective. They wanted it based on individuals having more and more freedom. And that doesn't seem to be what it is. And it seems like in order to maintain their freedom to be obnoxious assholes, they have absolutely no problem utilizing the state to take away rights and access to other groups of people. And that's going to be okay. So sorry to jump on that soapbox, but that's been a little bit of a raw nerve lately. I could go into a lot longer conversation about like politics and where I think it's going wrong, but I think a lot of it is being informed, especially in this country, by guys like Darth Dawkins, who have this radicalized take on religion and believe it's their way or the highway. And when I see people like that kind of leading the charge, people who seem to be motivated by a god of wrath, one that you need to be subservient to or else, I don't picture a great future when the one group with the most motivated ideological output is a group of ghouls, bent on making things truly fucking awful. The kind of people that watch the Purge movies with a notebook and pen, if that makes sense. So anyway, that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks everybody for showing up. Yeah, I'm going to be posting a couple more things hopefully in the rest of the week. I'm probably going to do a few more premieres so I can do some kind of like quick takes on a few short videos that I haven't been able to comment on and just kind of post those as premieres. It's been harder for me to actually get anything out during the week. I've been pretty busy. But I hope everybody that watched this had a good time. To House of Comments and somebody else that popped in as a reactionary who I'm pretty sure came into troll. I will probably unblock you if you guys want to come back. But I was not in the mood to deal with any of that, and I probably overreacted, at least in the case of House of Comments part. But but there's just been, I don't want my channel to be that place, and I don't want to see my live chat devolve into a group of alt-writers coming in there just to incite a bunch of bullshit in the chat. So. Anyway, thank you everybody for being here. I hope you have a great weekend. If your weekend's underway, I hope that's going good too. Like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. Send me notes, send me emails. Let me know if you got comments, questions, concerns, anything went wrong. You just have a bone to pick with me or you think I'm stupid. Let me know. But I will wrap it up there, and I will see you the next time I'm on here. Take care. Goodbye.